Welcome to Build Better Teams, the podcast for leaders who want to improve collaboration, strengthen communication, and create real alignment inside their teams. Here we explore team building strategies, leadership development, and hands-on approaches like Lego Serious Play that help teams think, build, and solve problems together. Let's get started so you can lead more effective, aligned, and engaged organizations. Welcome back to the Build Better Teams podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Russell. On this episode, we are diving into the communication gap that might just be happening on your team. We'll ask the question why your team isn't speaking up and how thinking with your hands can actually change everything. Have you ever walked out of a meeting and thought, why didn't anyone say what they were actually thinking? Maybe even worse, you thought the meeting went great. Everyone nodded, everyone agreed, and then afterwards, nothing changed. No action plan, no momentum, no real alignment. As leaders, many of us are trying incredibly hard to create workspaces where people feel safe and heard and connected. Yet so many teams aren't there yet. I have found myself as an employee on teams like this. And as a leader, I have seen communication gaps happening where I've had to jump in there and correct the problem. Now, in my work that I do, I get to actually go into other organizations and help teams communicate a little bit better. And so I'm going to talk about some of those strategies in this episode as well. If you're shaking your head and you're thinking, yes, there is that communication gap happening within my organization or my team, then let's talk about it. So if you're finding members of your team staying quiet in meetings, maybe they're hesitating to challenge ideas or they're just avoiding those conversations altogether, if everything seems very surface level and polite, rather than actually giving feedback and moving a project along, then those are where some of those gaps are happening. I believe in part that teams are finding this happening because we are trying to solve deeply human problems with methods that just aren't working any longer. Our society has us so consumed with productivity. How can we be more productive? How can we create more systems? How can we get more done in less time? But more meetings, more slide decks, more people talking at you instead of with you is not going to solve the communication issues happening within any team. Plus, the onset of apps and AI and tech is just taking over everywhere. So talking is more important. Building a team that really knows how to communicate well will make the difference in having your team stand out, especially with the rise of all of this technology we're seeing taking over around us. This is why I've become obsessed with the idea of the methodology called Lego Serious Play. And yes, it's Lego bricks, but before you think, wait, adults in the workplace, go back and listen to some previous episodes of the Build Better Teams podcast because I've talked about Lego Serious Play in many of them. It's a methodology I use when I get hired to work with organizations to help them strategic plan or figure out how to collaborate better, to solve issues, or just to communicate more. It's because you are using Lego. You are using these tools, these toys, to actually get your ideas out there, to communicate them better. I use these with adults, executives, founders, leadership teams, corporations, nonprofits, you name it, I have worked with a company. I host workshops, corporate events, company offsites, all using Lego Serious Play. It's the method in which team members actually come together through hands-on creative building, and it becomes memorable, and it's really focused on action. Communication, leadership, team engagement, those are what change how our teams focus on the work that we're doing and the problems at hand and the goals that we as leaders set out for our team members. The moment people on a team start building their ideas, then the rest of the team starts listening because they're not only hearing what you say, they're seeing what you're building. People finally start saying what they actually mean, and other people can see what they're saying in 3D using Lego bricks. The ideas are tangible and they take on a whole new meaning, which actually leads to clarity, new understanding, and of course, communication. Now, before I started facilitating these workshops, I spent over 16 years as a television producer. I worked in rooms full of creative people, really big personalities, a lot of heavy, heavy, fast deadlines, and a lot of high pressure. But what fascinated me most wasn't the production itself and what we were producing to go on your screen. It was the human behavior in the room. Who spoke up? Who stayed quiet? Who dominated those conversations? Who had brilliant ideas but never shared them? And I'm raising my hand right now because I was that producer who was afraid to speak my ideas in a room full of men. Not to say that my ideas were always brilliant, but I had the answer, thought I had something to contribute, but was not always feeling comfortable enough to share that idea. Now, this was a long time ago, and now I'm not afraid to share my opinion in any of the teams I'm a part of or teams that I run. But really, as a female executive, leading a meeting was hard. And I would be in those meetings where I couldn't get a word in edgewise because of other people speaking. And I noticed something over and over again, and maybe you've seen this as well, that the loudest voice in the room was not always the smartest. But traditional meetings are often designed that way. Whoever talks first shapes that conversation, right? Whoever talks the most influences that many more people, and they influence the direction that that meeting is taking. And many people, especially women, see this happening and we start shutting down. We simply don't want to interject. We don't want to cause ripples. We don't want to ruffle feathers of those that are louder and more boisterous. And sometimes we don't feel like there's enough air in the room for our ideas to be shared. Maybe you haven't felt this way, but chances are there's a team member or two on your team who has. And this is where that communication gap is really relevant. Research consistently shows that women are more likely to be interrupted, talked over, or hesitate to speak unless they feel psychologically safe. And we've talked about that a little bit on the podcast as well. So teams are really losing the valuable ideas that these individuals have to share. And that means that innovation suffers. And then the worst part is that resentment may start to build under that surface. So those people who aren't speaking up, who feel like their voice and their opinions don't matter, are feeling less a part of the team. As leaders, we might not even realize this is happening because silence sometimes looks like team members are agreeing when in reality, they are just tired of trying to compete against those dominant few. And silence is not always alignment. And I'll say that again because I really think it matters. Silence is not alignment. If you have a team member who rarely speaks up, that might be a team member that you need to spend a little bit more time with to really get under that surface and find out why this person is being a little bit more reserved in meetings or why they are not contributing as much or collaborating as well as others might be. One of the biggest mistakes we can make as a leader, as a manager, is making that assumption that the communication problems are solved by just encouraging others to speak up. And if they don't, that's okay. Because for many people in these rooms, they feel like it's a little too risky to speak up. What if you disagree with their ideas? What if by speaking up and maybe confronting someone else's opinion, what if I come off difficult? Or maybe what if my idea gets dismissed? So it's easier and simpler to just stay quiet. So now instead, these valuable assets, these people on your team who have been hired for their skill and their experience are not sharing their talents. They're not helping you and your team grow because they feel like they just need to sit still and be quiet. And this, my friend, is costing you ideas. It's costing you growth. It's costing you money because the best ideas are often sitting silently around those tables. Okay, so that is the problem. That is the communication gap that we want to fix. But how do we do that? How do we get members of our team to speak up when they aren't sure they want to? And this is where the idea of thinking with your hands becomes really powerful. And as a Lego Serious Play facilitator, I've seen firsthand how individuals can think differently when they build because they're thinking about the idea or the answer or their solution to a problem. So they're processing that through their mind and their brain becomes really activated. It's that hand to brain kind of connection. Then their creativity expands. And when they start putting pieces together, whether it's Lego, whether it's clay or Play Doh, whether it's crafts, whether it's Post it notes, when you start to put those things together, your creativity not only grows, your ideas now become visually seen by others, and your defensiveness lowers because you're not speaking right off the bat, you're showing, you're demonstrating this model or this idea through another object. So other people are seeing it, they're already understanding it before you even speak. And that's the beauty of it. You're explaining it one way visually, and then you're explaining it one way through your words. And my favorite part of the Lego Serious Play method is that it is 100% participation. Every single person in the room participates, not the extroverts, not just leadership, not just the fastest talker, everyone. And that changes the energy immediately because instead of standing up there as the boss and asking who wants to share, you ask, build your answer. And suddenly, those people who barely spoke are now explaining their ideas through their models, the models that they created themselves using Lego bricks, whatever you choose to use. They are visually sharing their ideas with the group, causing their idea to be seen, heard, and then understood. It's really incredible to witness this as a facilitator. Suddenly, after you start building and presenting without confrontation or finger pointing, the honest answers and feelings are displayed on the table for everyone to see. And those Lego bricks become a new language, a language for communicating. So you're not worried about titles or roles or politics. It's just honesty. People start to listen differently because when someone explains a model they built, you don't interrupt them the same way you would in an ordinary conversation because you're observing in a curious way. You're asking questions about why they chose that brick or why they placed the model in this way. And that shift alone can transform a team's dynamics. As leaders, we are navigating something incredibly complex in our work in the world right now because many of us are leading through uncertainty, burnout, restructuring, layoffs, all these rapid changes that we can't control. And at the same time, we are expected to create a team culture where everyone feels connected and valued, right? Connection doesn't happen because we schedule another Zoom call. It happens when we respect each other's time and talent and we establish a team where there is honest communication. A team where each member is heard and they feel comfortable contributing honestly. This requires that intentional leadership where we create space for honesty and respect. And by doing that, that team culture grows and you'll see less turnover because people will feel like they are truly valued. They want to show up and do their best at work each and every day because they feel like their ideas are needed because you are creating a true team environment. And one thing I've learned from facilitating many, many workshops over the years is that adults are desperate for permission to be human at work, to feel like they're not a number. They're not a machine. They're not a robot. They're not someone who's just typing on the keyboard and spitting out results. And yes, tech is great, but what human to human relationships are is ultimately what holds a team together. Most workplaces reward that professionalism over being authentic and being unique and individual. Have those polished answers over asking questions. But innovation rarely comes from being perfect. Innovation comes from exploring and giving your team members a chance to really experiment and research and try new ways to come up with a new, unique, more innovative result. So my suggestion here, my point of talking about this communication gap and how we can solve it is that getting creative is a way, it's a solution. Play is how humans learn, it's how we learned when we were born, and it's how we can learn now as adults. If you can find a way to establish, if you can find a way to bring your team together, to open up the lines of communication and imagination so that they can innovate in new ways and come up with new ideas together in a safe place, then you'll be so far ahead of many, many organizations out there right now. Now, I'm not saying that every meeting of yours needs to have me and my Lego bricks there. I'm just saying that if your team is not speaking openly, if you're noticing some issues, then it probably isn't just communication skills alone. It might be that psychological safety, it might be trust, it might be how your team is structured, it could be how you are asking your team to participate with each other. It's up to you to create that environment where speaking up and sharing freely is safe, because people can't collaborate authentically and come up with these new ideas and innovate in creative ways in today's society while they are still scared of what happens if they share honestly. I want to share a few tips with you on how you can start making that shift and creating better communication within your team. First, stop asking those verbal only questions. Instead of asking, any thoughts? Who has an idea? Try, write down your answer or write down your idea. Sketch it, build it, reflect on your idea before responding. This simple activity allows for a pause in the room. It's a different style of processing the question internally before sharing it with the group. Another idea is to create equal participation structures, meaning that everyone shares equally. And one of the reasons that Lego Serious Play works so well is that because everyone builds together, everyone shares, everyone contributes, and that is the beauty. Number 3, get comfortable with talking in metaphors. Sometimes people can explain their ideas more safely through symbolism rather than just being direct with their words. Someone may show their Lego model or their sketch and say, this model feels disconnected from the team. By saying it this way, it might feel safer to that team member rather than saying aloud in a meeting, I feel disconnected from all of you. Either way, the meaning still comes through. It's about making that team member feel more comfortable to share. Okay, my fourth and final tip is to remind yourself that silence in a meeting doesn't always mean that everyone agrees with you. Just because one person nodded their head or no one else pushed back on an idea, it doesn't mean that they are bought in. Sometimes it simply means they don't feel safe enough to disagree, or they are reading the room and they feel left out on a decision, so they just opt to stay quiet. I truly believe the future of leadership is going to require something different from us. Not more presentations, but more participation. Not leaders who always have the answers, but leaders who know how to unlock that wisdom that's already sitting in your room. The next time your team is feeling stuck or seeming quiet, instead of asking yourself, how do we get people to talk more? Maybe the better question is, how do we get people to feel safe enough to contribute honestly? Because when people feel safe, they speak. When they feel heard, they engage. And when teams speak up and engage, they don't just communicate better, they build better together. All right, that is it for this episode. To learn more about my company, Build Better Teams Consulting, and how Lego Serious Play can help bring some fresh ideas and team building to your organization, you can find my website in the show notes below or follow me on Instagram at Build Better Teams Consulting. Thanks for listening, and I will catch you on the next episode of the Build Better Teams podcast. Make it a great day.